Hey guys, tonight we take a slow, steamy walk through one of the strangest social hubs of the ancient world, the Roman public bathhouse. Imagine this: the air is thick with rising clouds of warm vapor, the scent of olive oil, wet stone, and let's be honest, a bit of humanity clings to every breath you take. You stand at the threshold of a vast, echoing structure built not just for bathing, but for gossip, politics, snacking, and showing off your social rank. It might sound relaxing, but don't get too comfortable. You're about to navigate a world where hygiene is a public spectacle, nudity is casual, and one wrong step could land you in scalding water. Or worse, make you the punchline of bathhouse graffiti. Yes, you're entering Rome's steamy playground, where the rules are unwritten but very real. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this social maze without at least a little embarrassment. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from, so drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing outside one of the most famous bathhouses in ancient Rome, the Baths of Caracalla. It's massive. Pillars stretch up toward the sky. Statues of Roman gods stand proudly at the gates, and the low rumble of dozens, maybe hundreds of voices echoes from inside. This isn't just a place to wash up. It's practically the city's living room. And the best part, almost everyone's welcome. Rich senators, soldiers fresh from the frontier, street vendors, even freed slaves, they all pass through the same arches into this marble-coated steam palace. You tug your borrowed toga a little tighter around your shoulders as you step forward. You can feel the heat leaking out from the entrance, already curling around your face like a warm mist. The first thing that hits you isn't the sight, though, it's the sound. Laughter, shouting, the slap of wet feet on stone floors. Somewhere deep inside, water splashes like someone just cannonballed into a pool. You hesitate for a second. Is this really what the poets meant when they praised Roman civilization? It feels more like a giant, echoing locker room. But you're here now. There's no turning back. You push through the open entrance and instantly the humidity wraps around you like a wet blanket. The interior stretches wide, a maze of arches, columns, and low stone benches where people lounge, chat, and strip down without a second thought. The floor beneath your sandals is slick, the air sticky with moisture. The further you move inside, the more the walls seem to sweat along with you. And there it is, the first thing you'll need to survive the Roman bathhouse: confidence. Not just the kind you show when walking into a party alone, but the kind that lets you stand in a room full of strangers knowing you'll soon be naked among them. No private stalls here, no frosted glass doors. Just you, your skin, and about 100 other bodies moving through clouds of steam. You glance around for guidance. Some folks seem completely at ease chatting with friends, oiling up their arms or adjusting the straps on their sandals. Others eye each other with the kind of judgment you'd expect at a high school prom. Historians still argue whether the bathhouse truly erased class boundaries, or if it simply gave the upper crust another stage to show off. Either way, your instincts tell you you're being sized up already. A group of older men in worn tunics nudge each other as you pass. You hear snippets of conversation, politics, gladiator match predictions, and one guy swearing he saw Jupiter himself in the clouds this morning. Typical bathhouse banter. A wave of heat rolls toward you from deeper inside. You follow it, slipping between groups of lounging bathers until you reach a small wooden stall near the wall. This is the Capona, the little booth where you'll pay your entry fee. Don't worry, you've brought a few quadrans, the copper coins used by ordinary citizens. You're not here to flaunt gold like a senator. The attendant barely glances up as you hand over your coins. He waves you through with a lazy flick of his wrist. And just like that, you're officially inside. You keep moving your sandals, slapping softly on the damp stone floor. The walls here are decorated with colorful mosaics. Sea creatures, Roman gods, and playful scenes of dolphins leaping through waves. You pause for a second, tracing one of the patterns with your eyes. Did they really hand-place all these tiny tiles? The craftsmanship is unbelievable. A group of younger men rush past you, laughing and jostling each other, headed toward the dressing rooms. You trail after them, curiosity pulling you deeper into the steam-soaked maze. Little do you know, your real initiation is about to begin. You follow the group through a tall archway and step into the appetiterium, the Roman equivalent of a locker room, but without any locker's privacy or personal space. This is where the bathhouse adventure truly begins. You stop just inside the doorway and take a breath. The air feels a little cooler here, but only just. The humidity clings to your skin like invisible fingers, already starting to make your clothes feel heavier. Around you, people are undressing with the kind of casual confidence that only comes from doing this hundreds of times before. Togas tunics, sandals all stripped off and placed in open cubby holes carved into the stone walls. No doors, no locks. Just open shelves like the world's least secure coat check. You hesitate for a moment. What exactly are the rules here? Is there a polite way to undress in front of total strangers without looking like it's your first time? You glance around trying to mimic the relaxed movements of the regulars. You loosen the knot at your shoulder, letting the fabric fall from your body, leaving you standing in the simplest of undergarments. Or if you're feeling particularly Roman today, nothing at all. You tuck your folded clothes into an empty cubbyhole and make a mental note of its location. Right there under the mosaic of Neptune riding a seahorse. You try to convince yourself you'll remember even though the sea of identical niches stretches out in every direction. You aren't the only one worried. A young man next to you is eyeing his shelf like it's going to sprout legs and walk off. And honestly, it might as well. Theft in the bathhouse is so common that wealthy Romans often bring their own bodyguards just to watch over their belongings. There's even graffiti warning visitors about thieves lurking nearby, which feels oddly modern, doesn't it? You glance around again, half expecting to spot someone stuffing a toga into their tunic. No luck. Everyone here looks just innocent enough to make you suspicious. There's a quiet shuffle beside you. An older man in a worn woolen wrap leans close and mutters, "Best pay the capsarius if you value your sandals." You turn toward him, but he's already moved on, disappearing into the crowd like a ghost. The capsarius. Right. You spot them now, boys in short tunics standing near the walls, their eyes sharp and calculating. Their job? Watching your belongings? For a fee, of course. They won't stop a thief unless you've already slipped them a coin. You weigh your options, glance back at your cubbyhole and sigh. You dig into your pouch, flick a coin toward the nearest capsarius, and hope he's more trustworthy than he looks. With your worldly possessions secured, or at least you hope so, you turn your attention to the next part of the ritual. You step forward, following the slow-moving line of half-dressed, oily bodies. You pass another doorway, and the temperature spikes again, wrapping around you like a damp wool blanket left too long in the sun. You're heading toward the palaestra, the open-air courtyard where the real warm-up begins. And by warm-up, you weren't expecting, well, this. The courtyard is buzzing with energy. Men are exercising, stretching, wrestling, throwing weighted discs called halteres, and practicing mock combat with wooden swords. You glance down at yourself. You were expecting a gentle soak, not Olympic training. But this is part of the Roman way. The body must be prepared before bathing, or so the doctors claim. They say sweating before washing opens the pores, removes toxins, and strengthens your constitution. Historians still argue whether these warm-up routines were genuinely for health, or just another way for men to show off their muscles in public. You lean toward the latter, especially after watching one man dramatically flex his biceps before throwing a discus with the grace of a man who clearly skipped arm day. You decide to play along. You stretch your arms overhead, twist your torso side to side, trying not to look too awkward. A pair of bathers beside you are playfully grappling, slipping and sliding on the stone floor. They laugh as they fall into a heap, their friends cheering them on like they've just won a gladiator match. You glance toward the far end of the courtyard where a man, probably a physicianess, is giving health advice to anyone who will listen. You catch phrases like, balance the humors and purge the bad air, and you can't help but smile. Roman medicine. Half philosophy, half guesswork. And here's the kicker, this physician isn't just talking. He's selling tiny vials of something that smells suspiciously like vinegar mixed with crushed herbs. Miracle cure, he claims. A single drop in your bathwater and you'll live to see 100. Right. You continue stretching, eyeing the next doorway, the entrance to the oiling room. You've heard stories about this part. No soap, no shampoo, just pure olive oil massaged into your skin like you're preparing for a salad. You take one last deep breath of the courtyard's fresh open air, knowing that soon you'll be stepping into a chamber where the air is thicker, the floors are slipperier, and things are about to get a lot more greasy. You step carefully toward the arched entry where warm oil and slippery floors await. The moment you cross the threshold, you catch the distinct aroma, rich, earthy, and just a little overwhelming. Olive oil, gallons of it, lining the walls in oversized clay amphorae sealed with wax and stamped with the supplier's mark. Some from local groves outside Rome, some imported from as far away as Hispania or North Africa. You almost chuckle realizing you're about to experience the Roman version of artisanal skincare. The room hums with the quiet rhythm of attendants moving from person to person, pouring oil into cupped hands and smoothing it across shoulders, backs, arms, and legs. You watch for a moment, noting the methodical way they work. This isn't some relaxing spa massage, it's preparation for what's coming next, the strigil. You shuffle forward as your turn approaches, trying not to slip on the oil-slick floor. One poor soul ahead of you loses their footing, entirely landing with a wet slap that echoes off the curved ceiling. Nobody flinches. Apparently that's a common soundtrack here. A young attendant with olive-toned skin and curly hair gestures for you to stand on a flat stone slab. You comply, raising your arms awkwardly, unsure where to look as they begin. The oil is surprisingly warm, drizzled, generously down your arms, across your chest and over your legs. It feels odd, slippery, heavy even, like you're being basted for some ancient recipe. The attendant works quickly, rubbing the oil into your skin with the flat of their palms, adding more when needed. You glance to your left and catch sight of another bather, examining the amphorae, commenting loudly that today's batch smells cheaper than last week's. Seems even ancient Romans had their olive oil snobs. Historians still argue whether the oiling ritual had true hygienic value or was more of a status display. After all, oil wasn't cheap. The richer the oil, the more impressive you looked, dripping like some kind of golden statue. Either way, you're glistening now, your skin slick and shining under the dim light filtering through narrow windows high in the walls. The attendant gives you a small nod. You're ready for the next step. You move toward a bench where a burly man stands holding a curved metal tool, the strigil. It's shaped like a flattened letter J, with a rounded handle and a scraping blade designed to remove the oil, sweat, and dirt from your body. You hesitate for just a moment, eyeing the tool with suspicion. It doesn't look sharp, but you've heard the stories. Too much pressure, and you'll leave with more than just clean skin. You'll leave with a collection of tiny bruises to remember the experience by. The man gestures for you to sit. You lower yourself onto the slick stone bench, trying not to slide right off. He places one heavy hand on your shoulder to steady you, then begins. The strigil scrapes down your arm in one long, slow motion. The sensation is weirdly satisfying, like scratching an itch you didn't know you had. He works methodically, scraping the oil into little piles that resemble melted wax. He moves to your back, then your legs, each stroke removing more of the greasy layer. You grit your teeth when he hits a sensitive spot on your ribs. He doesn't seem to notice or care. Across the room, another attendant is gathering the scraped-off mixture of oil sweat and dirt into small pots. You raise an eyebrow. Surely they aren't. Selling that are they, but yes they are. Some Romans believed this grimy concoction had medicinal properties. Gladiators' scrapings in particular were sold as a kind of muscle salve for aching joints. You resist the urge to gag. As the scraping continues, you glance around and notice the social performance unfolding. A group of men are loudly boasting about their military achievements, flexing their freshly oiled muscles, as if they're auditioning for a statue commission. Others lie back with their eyes closed, pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. It's a delicate dance of pride, modesty, and playful rivalry. One man nearby leans in and whispers something to his neighbor. They both laugh under their breath. You catch the phrase capillamentum interruptum, a joking reference to someone whose hairpiece apparently didn't survive the strigil treatment. You stifle a chuckle. It seems bathhouse humor hasn't changed much in 2,000 years. Your attendant finishes with a final scrape down your back. You stand feeling strangely lighter now that the oil and grime are gone. The floor seems even slipperier under your bare feet, but you manage to steady yourself. You look back at the bench at the strigil still glistening with the remains of who knows how many bathers before you. Sanitation standards. Let's just say the Romans weren't exactly following modern health codes. As you step away, you hear a man nearby complaining that the strigils in Caracalla's baths are blunter than a senator's wit. Another bather counters, claiming they prefer it that way, less risk of broken skin. Historians still argue whether the strigil was really that effective at cleaning, or just another part of the elaborate bathhouse ritual. You're not sure, but you do know one thing. You smell like a freshly pressed olive now, and that's apparently a sign you're ready to move on. You wipe your hands on your thighs, glance toward the next archway, and start walking toward the gentle, hazy glow of the tepidarium. The air changes again as you pass under the next stone arch. The sharp scents of oil and sweat begin to fade, replaced by something softer, warm air, laced with a hint of mineral steam and damp stone. You've arrived in the tepidarium, the warm room designed to ease your body into the bathhouse experience without shocking your senses. It's the halfway house between the cool outer chambers and the scorching caldarium you'll face soon enough. The room glows softly from oil lamps perched in carved wall niches. Their flickering flames cast dancing shadows across the mosaic floor, an elegant scene of dolphins chasing sea nymphs through curling waves. You pause for a moment, appreciating the craftsmanship, every tiny tile hand-placed. How long did it take to make this floor months years? Historians still argue whether these intricate designs were purely decorative, or if they held deeper meanings, coded symbols of the gods, the sea, or even subtle political statements. You shake off the thought as the heat presses gently against your skin. Not heavy, but comforting, like wrapping yourself in a freshly warmed blanket on a chilly morning. You aren't sweating yet, but you can feel your pores opening your body, relaxing after the awkward tension of the oiling and scraping ritual. Low stone benches line the walls, occupied by bathers reclining on folded towels or chatting lazily with friends. You spot an empty corner and make your way over, careful not to disturb the older man snoring softly nearby. You ease down onto the warm stone, letting your muscles settle. The heat sinks into your skin, loosening the tightness in your shoulders. You lean back against the wall and close your eyes for a moment. You don't get long to enjoy the peace before a group of younger bathers enters their voices, cutting through the hum like a dropped amphora. They're arguing loudly about the results of yesterday's chariot races at the Circus Maximus. One swears by the blues, another by the greens. You smile to yourself. Even here in this warm oasis, Roman sports fandom never sleeps. One of them bumps into your bench muttering an apology as he flops down beside you. He glances your way, then leans in conspiratorially. "Don't mind the shouting," he whispers. "They'll tire themselves out before the caldarium roasts them alive." You offer a polite nod, unsure if conversation is expected or if he's just filling the silence. Before you can respond, he leans back and starts humming softly to himself, leaving you to the warmth once again. Time passes strangely in the tepidarium. Minutes stretch like hours. You find yourself staring at the ceiling's curved stonework, tracing the patterns of cracks and shadows. Somewhere in the distance, water drips rhythmically like nature's sleepy metronome. A vendor slips quietly through the room, balancing a tray of small clay cups filled with watered wine. You watch as a few bathers wave him over, exchanging coins for the drink. The vendor catches your eye and raises an eyebrow. You consider it for a moment before shaking your head. You're already feeling lightheaded from the heat wine can wait. Just as you're beginning to doze off, a sudden blast of laughter startles you. A philosopher robed in nothing but a towel and a smug grin is holding court near the center of the room. He's loudly explaining the meaning of life, or at least trying to, while his audience alternates between nodding seriously and barely stifling their giggles. He raises a finger dramatically. Life, he declares, is like this bathhouse. You enter with nothing, you leave with nothing. But if you play your part well, you might just enjoy the steam in between. Someone claps sarcastically. Another mutters that they've heard better wisdom from a fishmonger. Still, you have to admit, it's not the worst observation you've ever heard. You shift on the bench, feeling the warm stone pressing into your back. Your skin has started to glisten again, not from oil this time, but from the steady embrace of the heat. You know what's coming next. You've heard the stories. The caldarium waits just beyond the next arch. The hottest room of all. The place where breath comes thick and slow, where the walls sweat more than the people inside. You glance toward the doorway. Some bathers rise and move toward it with the kind of reluctant determination you imagine soldiers must feel, marching toward battle. Others remain behind, content to linger in this liminal space between comfort and challenge. You stand wiping your damp palms on your thighs. The floor feels warmer under your feet now, the stone heated from below by the hidden hypocaust system you've heard whispers about. Slaves stoking fires beneath the floor, feeding the bathhouse's invisible dragon. The engineering marvel of it hums beneath you, keeping the strange, steamy world alive. You take one last look around the tepidarium, the quiet hum of conversation, the drowsy bathers sprawled like lazy cats in the warmth. The philosopher now arguing with himself because no one else seems to care anymore. Then with a deep breath, you step toward the next challenge, the caldarium. The first thing that hits you is the thickness of the air. The moment you pass through the archway into the caldarium, the heavy wall of heat presses against your chest like you've stepped into a kiln. Your lungs instinctively tighten, forcing you to slow your breathing. You take another step forward, blinking as a fresh wave of steam curls around your face, filling your nose with the mineral-rich scent of damp stone heated water, and something faintly metallic, almost like wet iron. The room is dimly lit, the air so thick with steam that shapes and figures melt into foggy silhouettes. You can just make out the outline of a massive heated pool in the center, its surface shimmering with faint ripples. Oil lamps flicker weakly on the walls, their light struggling to pierce the swirling mist. You pause on the edge of the room, giving your body a moment to adjust. A bead of sweat slides down your temple, quickly followed by another. It's like standing inside a wet oven. You resist the urge to turn back. You've made it this far, you're not about to chicken out now. You step forward carefully, placing one foot in front of the other. The floor beneath you is hot to the touch, forcing you to shift your weight quickly as you make your way toward the pool. You spot bathers already reclining along the edges, some submerged up to their shoulders, others lounging on the heated stone benches built into the walls. Their skin glistens with sweat and condensation, their faces flushed from the relentless heat. One man nearby groans dramatically, slumping back against the stone with his arms spread wide. "Ah, the gods have blessed us with this infernal oven," he mutters to no one in particular. His friend sitting beside him shakes his head with a crooked smile. "Blessed, I feel like a boiled octopus." You smile under your breath, the tension easing just a little. It's comforting to know you're not the only one struggling to keep your dignity intact. You edge closer to the pool, dipping your toes into the water. It's hot, almost uncomfortably so, but not unbearable. You lower yourself in slowly, the heat wrapping around you like a wet, heavy blanket. Your muscles instinctively unclench, surrendering to the warmth. Somewhere across the pool, a loud splash echoes as someone bravely dunks their entire body under the surface. You watch the ripples spread across the water, breaking the mirrored stillness. A few bathers glance over, but quickly return to their own quiet rituals, massaging sore muscles, leaning back with their eyes closed, or whispering softly with companions. You lean your head against the smooth stone edge, tilting your face toward the ceiling. High above, the curved dome disappears into a haze of steam. You can barely make out the faint outlines of decorative plasterwork vines, laurel wreaths, maybe even a few scattered stars. The details blur and shift like a half-remembered dream. Historians still argue whether the caldarium was designed more for health or for sheer sensory indulgence. Roman physicians recommended it for everything from arthritis to melancholy, claiming the deep heat could purge the body of bad humors and rebalance the spirit. Of course, they also warned about fainting nosebleeds and other delightful side effects if you stayed in too long. You decide not to push your luck. You ease yourself back onto the stone bench, letting the water lap at your waist. The heat is starting to fog your mind in the best possible way. You can almost feel your muscles untying themselves one knot at a time. A man nearby leans toward his companion, whispering something about adding herbs to the water for extra healing. You catch the word rosmarinus rosemary. Apparently, some bathhouses experimented with scented steam, tossing herbs into the heating system to create fragrant clouds. You glance around, half expecting to catch a whiff of something floral, but tonight it's just the earthy, mineral-heavy steam. Across the pool, two bathers are trying to outlast each other, locked in a silent battle of endurance. Their faces flush, their brows dripping with sweat. One finally caves, groaning as he stumbles out of the water and collapses dramatically on the bench. His rival raises his fist in mock triumph, earning a few lazy claps from the nearby bathers. You smirk, knowing your own limit is fast approaching. You glance toward the far wall where another archway beckons its cool, dark opening like a portal to another world. You've heard the stories. The frigidarium waits there. The cold plunge. The final shock to seal the bathhouse ritual. You stand slowly, feeling the heat cling to your skin like a second layer. Droplets of sweat run in steady streams down your arms and legs. Your heart pounds softly in your chest, not from exertion, but from the sheer weight of the heat. You take one last look around, memorizing the way the steam curls through the air, the muted hum of conversation, the flicker of lantern light on damp stone. This is the heart of the Roman bathhouse, the caldarium, the fiery womb, where Romans come to sweat out their worries and leave their cares behind. You step out of the water, your skin tingling, your head swimming just a little. You make your way toward the next threshold where cool air spills from the darkened archway like a promise. Time to face the cold. It's almost too much of a shock when you step into the frigidarium. The air feels sharp, clean, and biting as it prickles against your overheated skin. Your whole body jolts awake like someone just yanked you out of a dream. You stop just inside the entrance, hugging your arms across your chest as goosebumps race over your skin. This is the final act of the bathhouse ritual. The cold plunge designed to close your pores, jolt your senses, and, according to Roman doctors, lock in all those health benefits you supposedly just earned in the caldarium. You're not convinced, but you're here and you're not about to be the one who chickens out. The room itself is much smaller. The ceiling lower, the air clearer. No clouds of steam here, just cool drafts slipping through tiny high windows. The pool at the center is still and glassy like a mirror made of liquid marble. Its surface barely moves, disturbed only by the occasional ripple from a brave soul slipping beneath the surface. You watch as a burly man takes a deep breath, crosses his arms over his chest, and plunges in head first with barely a splash. He resurfaces a second later, gasping and shaking water from his hair with a grin that says, "I survived." You edge closer to the pool, dipping your toes in first. It's cold. Shockingly cold. Every instinct tells you to back away, but you glance around and realize you've got an audience. Two older bathers are watching you from the benches, their faces unreadable. Are they judging you? Probably. It feels like a test. With a quiet breath, you lower yourself into the water, inch by inch. It feels like tiny needles pricking your skin. Your breath catches in your throat. You force yourself down further until the water reaches your chest. The cold wraps around you like a vice, squeezing the air from your lungs. You sit there for a moment, motionless, letting your body adjust. It takes longer than you'd like. Every muscle screams to climb back out, but you hold your ground, focusing on your breathing, slow, steady, controlled. One of the older bathers nearby leans toward his companion and mutters, "First-timers always look like they've seen Pluto himself." You can't help but smirk through chattering teeth. They're not wrong. Historians still argue whether the frigidarium was a medical necessity or just an extreme finish to an already elaborate ritual. Some claim it helped circulation, others believed it kept the skin youthful. You suspect it mostly just made people feel heroic for surviving it. You glance around and notice a few bathers skipping the pool entirely, opting instead to splash themselves with cold water from small basins near the walls. You consider following their lead, but pride keeps you rooted in place. You've come this far. After a few more agonizing moments, you feel your body start to settle. The initial sting fades into a dull, bearable chill. You lean your head back against the stone edge, staring up at the dim ceiling. Tiny droplets fall from above, dripping in slow, rhythmic beats onto the pool's surface. It almost sounds like rain on a quiet night. Somewhere to your right, someone slips into the water beside you with a quiet grunt. You turn slightly and recognize the young man from earlier, the one humming in the tepidarium. He catches your eye and raises a single eyebrow. "Takes your breath, doesn't it?" he whispers. You nod, unable to form a witty reply with your teeth still chattering slightly. He leans back, letting out a long breath. They say the Emperor himself bathes here sometimes. Imagine that, rubbing shoulders with the divine. He chuckles softly as if he doesn't really believe it. Neither do you. The Emperor has his own private palaces after all. But the thought lingers, what if he did? What if the most powerful man in Rome once sat exactly where you are now, shivering just the same? You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the subtle sounds around you. The soft drip of water, the low hum of conversation, the distant clang of a dropped amphora somewhere deeper in the complex. You could almost fall asleep right here if you weren't frozen to the bone. Finally sensing you've earned whatever bragging rights come with surviving the cold plunge, you pull yourself out of the pool water streaming from your skin in icy rivulets. The floor feels even colder beneath your feet now, but you press on, wrapping your arms around yourself for warmth. You make your way toward the exit, passing a row of bathers wrapped in towels, sipping wine, and looking far more comfortable than you feel. One of them raises a clay cup toward you in silent salute. You nod in return, your breath visible in the cool air. The bathhouse isn't finished with you yet. You've heard whispers of more pleasures beyond the pools, massages, food, entertainment. But for now, you focus on the simple task of warming your body back to life. You move toward the next chamber, the unctorium, where the promise of soft towels and skilled hands await. Time to experience what some Romans claim is the real reason they come here, not the water, not the heat, but the touch. You rub your arms briskly as you cross into the unctorium, the massage and oiling room, where bodies are worked over like dough in a baker's hands. The air here feels noticeably warmer than the icy frigidarium, though not quite as suffocating as the caldarium. You release a slow, shaky breath as life starts to creep back into your limbs. The room hums with low chatter and the occasional satisfied groan. You scan the space, taking in the sight of bathers stretched out on long, flat stone slabs. Some lie face down, arms dangling limply over the sides, while others sit upright, flexing their shoulders as attendants knead their muscles with the focus of artists sculpting clay. You shuffle toward an empty slab and lower yourself down carefully. The stone is warm beneath you, a welcome contrast to the cold still clinging to your skin. An attendant approaches, wiping his hands on a linen cloth. He's built like a statue, broad shoulders, strong hands, and a face that could pass for one of the marble busts lining the forum. Without a word, he pours a thin stream of oil into his palms, rubs them together, and sets to work on your shoulders. His touch is firm, bordering on brutal. You grit your teeth as his fingers dig into knots you didn't even know you had. It's less of a soothing massage and more like someone trying to crush the tension out of you like a loaf of stale bread. You stifle a grunt when he hits a particularly tight spot near your shoulder blade. He leans in, muttering quietly, "If it doesn't hurt, it's not working." You're not sure whether to laugh or cry. Across the room, a rather dramatic scene unfolds. One bather flails his arms loudly, accusing his masseur of trying to dislocate his soul. The attendant merely smirks, doubling down on the pressure until the man's protests melt into helpless laughter. Seems you're not alone in your suffering. Historians still argue whether these intense massages were purely therapeutic, or if they doubled as a test of endurance, an unofficial contest of who could take the most punishment without crying out. Some Romans believed bruises were proof of a job well done, worn like badges of honor. You're beginning to suspect they might have been onto something. Your attendant shifts his focus to your arms, working his way down to your forearms, then your hands. His thumbs press into your palms with surprising precision, as if he's unlocking tiny pressure points you never knew existed. You exhale slowly, feeling the tension drain from your fingers. He moves to your legs next, kneading your calves with the same relentless rhythm. You try to relax, but every so often he hits a tender spot that makes your toes curl involuntarily. You catch yourself clenching your jaw and force yourself to breathe through it. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you can already hear tomorrow's soreness whispering, "You'll thank me later." Just as you're starting to wonder if he's secretly training for a gladiator match, using your body as practice, the pressure finally eases. The attendant wipes his hands on the cloth again, gives your shoulder a firm pat, and steps back. No words, no dramatic farewell, just a nod that says, "You survived." You sit up slowly, rolling your shoulders. You feel different, lighter somehow, like the layers of tension you carried in with you have been left behind on the stone slab. You glance around the room again, noticing that the atmosphere has shifted. The earlier chatter has softened to a low murmur. Bathers lie sprawled on benches, eyes half closed, looking thoroughly wrung out but strangely content. One man nearby is already snoring softly, his head resting on a folded towel. A boy carrying a small basket of herbs walks past, offering sprigs of lavender and rosemary to anyone willing to pay a few extra coins for their relaxing properties. You watch as a woman accepts a bundle, crushing the leaves between her fingers before inhaling deeply. You can almost smell the faint woody sweetness from where you sit. You stand stretching your arms overhead. Your skin glows faintly under the flickering lamplight, a thin sheen of oil catching the light like polished bronze. You feel both heavier and lighter all at once, as if gravity itself has shifted. Off in the corner, you hear someone mention food the Pepina or snack bar just a few chambers over. Your stomach gives a quiet, traitorous growl. You hadn't noticed it until now, but the combination of heat-cold massage and hours spent navigating this strange social circus has left you surprisingly hungry. You start toward the exit, the murmur of laughter and clinking cups growing louder with every step. You've heard rumors of the Bathhouse's curious menu-stuffed dormice honey cakes mulled wine. Time to find out if the food here is as bizarre and unforgettable as the bathing rituals. You follow the sound of conversation and laughter down a short corridor, drawn toward the unmistakable aroma of fresh bread, warm wine, and roasting meat. Turns out the Bathhouse doesn't just tend to the body, it caters to the stomach too. You arrive at a small, bustling courtyard half open to the night air. This is the Pepina, the Roman equivalent of a snack bar. You spot vendors lined up along one side their stone counters, stacked with all sorts of foods both tempting and questionable. The first thing you notice is the scent of honeyed wine or mulsum being poured into small clay cups. The server works quickly filling and passing them along to a line of damp, towel-wrapped bathers. You consider grabbing one, but your attention shifts to a tray of pastries dusted with sesame seeds. Your stomach tightens again at the sight. You step into line behind a couple of chatty merchants, catching bits of their conversation about shipping routes and grain prices. One of them gestures toward a platter on the vendor's counter. You lean in to see what's caught his eye. Stuffed dormice. Yes, you heard that right. Tiny rodents roasted to golden perfection, stuffed with a mixture of pork herbs and honeyed nuts. They're served on little lettuce leaves like some kind of bizarre finger food. You raise an eyebrow. You'd heard the rumors, but seeing it up close is something else. The merchant grins, popping one into his mouth without hesitation. He catches you staring and winks. "Better than they look," he says with a chuckle. You give a polite smile but decide to pass for now. You're not that brave. Moving along the counter, you spot more familiar options. Flatbreads topped with olive paste, small bowls of figs, and trays of cheese drizzled with honey. You grab a piece of bread and a handful of dried fruit, exchanging a few coins with the vendor, who barely looks up from his task. You find an empty spot on a low stone bench and settle in, savoring the simplicity of the meal. The bread is chewy and warm, the fig sweet and sticky on your tongue. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the flavors pull you deeper into this strange little pocket of Roman life. Nearby, a group of bathers are passing around a skin of wine, their laughter growing louder with each round. One of them gestures wildly, almost knocking over a platter of pastries. His companions double over in laughter, clutching their sides as he tries to steady himself. You catch snippets of their conversation jokes about the senator who supposedly slipped in the caldarium last week, landing face first in the pool. One man swears he saw it happen, while another argues that it was just a rumor. Historians still argue whether these bathhouse tales are exaggerated gossip or kernels of truth that have somehow survived the centuries. You tear off another piece of bread, glancing around the courtyard. The atmosphere feels looser here, like the strict social rules of the bathhouse have melted away under the influence of warm wine and full bellies. To your left, a man begins reciting verses from Ovid's Metamorphoses, his voice rich and theatrical, drawing a small audience who clap and cheer with every dramatic pause. Someone nearby offers him a fig as payment, which he accepts with a deep bow before launching into another stanza. You lean back against the cool stone wall, letting the sounds wash over you, the rustling of robes, the clink of clay cups, the hum of laughter under the night sky. It's easy to see why so many Romans spend hours here, slipping between steam rooms, massage slabs, and snack stalls, like it's all part of some grand, unhurried performance. You glance up at the stars just beginning to prick the sky above the open courtyard. The night feels soft, the air cooling just enough to chase away the lingering heat from earlier. A vendor walks past, balancing a tray of cheese-stuffed olives, the scent briefly breaking your concentration. You flag him down and exchange a coin for a small handful. The first bite surprises you, salty, rich, and oddly satisfying. As you savor the snack, you hear the distant click-clack of dice hitting stone. You turn toward the sound, spotting a small group huddled around a low table near the far wall. Coins glint in the lamplight. As they wager on rolls, their faces tense with the kind of concentration you'd expect at a gladiator arena. One man slams his fist on the table, cursing under his breath, as another scoops up the winnings with a grin that stretches from ear to ear. Looks like the games are heating up. You finish your last olive, brushing the salt from your fingertips. You've heard stories about how gambling at the baths can spiral into full-blown debt or fistfights if tempers flare. But tonight, the energy feels lighthearted. For now, anyway. You rise from your bench, stretching your arms overhead. You've eaten, you've drunk, and you've survived stuffed dormice, at least visually. What's next? You glance back toward the gaming table, curiosity pulling you toward the sound of rolling dice and murmured wagers. Looks like the night's not quite over yet. You weave your way toward the low table where the dice players are hunched, completely absorbed in their little world of risk and reward. The table itself is nothing fancy, just a flat slab of stone with shallow grooves worn into its surface from years of tossing dice. Clay cups filled with bronze and copper coins sit in front of each player, and beside them tiny knucklebone-shaped dice called tally glint faintly in the lamplight. You hover just behind one of the players, trying not to get in the way. No one seems to mind your presence. This is Rome, after all, where strangers slide easily into the background of other people's conversations and games. You lean in slightly, watching the action unfold. The man across from you, a wiry fellow with close-cropped hair and a crooked grin, shakes the tolly in his cupped hands, closes his eyes like he's praying to Fortuna herself, and lets them tumble onto the table. The little bones clatter, noisily spinning before settling into their final positions. A cheer goes up as the man slaps the table with both hands, pulling the pot toward him with theatrical flair. His neighbor groans, dropping his face into his hands, muttering something about never trusting a lucky man twice. Someone leans back on his stool and catches you watching. He grins and pats the empty spot beside him. First time he asks in a tone that suggests he already knows the answer. You nod, sliding down onto the cool stone bench. The man picks up a spare set of dice and rolls them toward you. You catch them clumsily, the smooth, bone-white surfaces clicking in your palm. 4 sides, he explains. Numbers 1 through 4. Best throw wins the pot. Simple enough, until it isn't. You weigh the dice in your hand, feeling their lightness. They remind you more of tiny pebbles than any game piece you're used to. The man leans in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Careful. The house always wins, but sometimes Fortuna looks the other way. You glance at the small pile of coins in front of him. Not much, maybe the price of a cheap tunic. You figure it's safe enough. You toss a couple of small bronze coins onto the table, matching the others. The circle leans in as you give the dice a cautious shake and let them roll. The tally dance across the stone, spinning and wobbling before landing with a soft tap. A lucky throw, apparently, judging by the grins and groans around you. Someone claps your shoulder with a little too much enthusiasm. You chuckle softly, sliding the modest winnings toward your corner of the table. It's strangely addicting, the low stakes. The easy laughter, the shared energy of people who've already shed their daily worries in the steam rooms and massage halls. Here in this tucked-away corner of the bathhouse, nobody seems to care who you are outside these walls. Senator, soldier, servant, it all melts into the background when the dice hit the table. You watch another round unfold. The wiry man from earlier is on a losing streak now, scratching his head and muttering about bad luck following him like a stray dog. His neighbor teases him with a grin, sliding his winnings closer. Historians still argue whether gambling in the baths was officially tolerated or quietly overlooked. Technically, betting outside licensed venues was frowned upon, even illegal in some eras. But you get the feeling no one here cares much for official rules tonight. A soft hum of music begins to drift through the air, someone nearby strumming a lyre, plucking gentle notes that weave around the chatter like a warm breeze. The sound shifts the mood, slightly softening the edges of the noisy game. You glance toward the source and spot a woman seated on a low stool, her fingers dancing over the strings as she hums quietly. A small audience gathers, drawn by the gentle melody. Even the dice players pause for a moment, letting the sound settle over them like a thin musical blanket. One of the men beside you leans back, stretching his arms overhead. Music's the only thing better than wine in this place, he mutters with a sleepy grin. You let the dice rest in your palm, feeling their smooth, cool surface as you listen. The game has slowed the players, content to sip their watered wine and let the music take over for a while. You glance around the papina, noticing for the first time just how many different kinds of people are gathered here. Freedmen and citizens, traders and travelers, men and women, young and old. The bathhouse truly is Rome's great equalizer, at least for a few hours each day. Your gaze drifts back to the lyre player, who finishes her song with a soft flourish. A few polite claps echo through the courtyard, and someone tosses her a small coin. She catches it with a grateful nod before rising and disappearing through a side door. The spell breaks and the dice begin rolling again. You feel the urge to stay to play another round, but curiosity tugs at you once more. You stand, giving your table mates a polite nod. One of them calls after you, "Don't forget luck's like steam. Enjoy it before it disappears." You chuckle softly, tucking the phrase into your memory as you wander back toward the inner chambers. The bathhouse still has more to show you, and if the rumors are true, the philosophers are holding court somewhere deeper inside. Time to go listen. You follow the familiar winding halls, your bare feet padding softly on the smooth, damp stone. The air grows warmer again as you leave the papina behind. The hum of voices begins to shift in tone, not the loose, noisy laughter of gamblers and wine drinkers, but something slower, more deliberate. You round a corner and find yourself on the edge of another open chamber, this one quieter, dimly lit by wall-mounted lamps. Here, the bathhouse turns into something closer to a forum of ideas where the currency isn't coins or dice, but words. A small crowd is gathered in a semicircle seated on benches or lounging on towels. In the middle stands a man draped in a slightly damp woolen wrap, pacing slowly, gesturing with wide, theatrical flourishes. You settle in at the edge, careful not to interrupt as the speaker's voice rises just enough for you to catch the rhythm of his words. He's arguing passionately about the nature of the soul. Is the soul... He demands, raising a finger toward the low, curved ceiling, like steam, rising and dispersing after death? Or is it like oil, sinking hidden but forever present in the depths of the body? The crowd murmurs. A few nod thoughtfully. Others glance at each other with knowing smirks, as if they've heard this debate 100 times already. You recognize the man. He's the same philosopher you overheard earlier in the tepidarium, the one who compared life to the bathhouse itself. Seems he's back at it again, his words swirling through the steam like lazy fish in a fountain. Someone challenges him. A woman sitting cross-legged on a towel leans forward, her voice steady and clear. And what of the mind? Surely it governs both steam and oil. Without the mind, what are we but empty vessels? There's a ripple of soft laughter, not mocking, but entertained. The philosopher narrows his eyes, stroking his damp beard as he considers her challenge. You smile already, sensing where this is headed. This isn't just debate, it's performance. Historians still argue whether these bathhouse philosophers had any real influence on Roman thought, or if they were simply part of the entertainment amateurs in pursuit of an audience rather than truth. But here, under the flickering lamplight, it feels real enough. The philosopher paces again, adjusting his woolen wrap as he speaks. The mind, you say, a dangerous thing. Too much mind, and you miss the simple pleasures. The heat of the caldarium, the sting of the frigidarium, the taste of honeyed wine. He pauses, letting the silence hang for just a moment before adding with a sly grin. And perhaps the quiet company of strangers who pretend not to listen but hear everything. You freeze for a heartbeat, realizing his gaze is aimed in your direction. The small crowd turns, following his line of sight. You feel the weight of a dozen curious eyes settle on you. For half a second, you consider shrinking back into the shadows. But something stirs a playful boldness, maybe inspired by the wine, the heat, or the strange freedom of this night. You lean forward slightly, meeting his gaze. And yet, you reply, your voice steady despite the flutter in your chest. Here we all sit stripped of titles, names, and robes, sharing the same steam, the same oil, the same questions. The crowd hums with quiet approval. The philosopher blinks, then breaks into a wide grin. Ah, he says, spreading his arms. A worthy addition to the circle. The woman who challenged him earlier smirks, raising her clay cup in a small salute. You lean back, heart pounding just a little faster, but not from fear. There's something thrilling about this dance of words, strangers coming together to poke at the edges of meaning, all within the steamy walls of a bathhouse. A man beside you leans in and whispers, "Careful! They'll rope you into quoting Plato next." You chuckle softly, grateful for the release of tension. The philosopher carries on, weaving his words into stories of the gods, the stars, and the fragile nature of memory. He speaks of Heraclitus the thinker, who once said, "You cannot step into the same river twice." And yet here we are, he muses, stepping into the same bathhouse day after day, chasing the same answers. The hours seem to stretch again, the warm air slowing the pace of conversation. People shift, recline, sip their drinks. A few drift off their heads, resting on their arms. The debate softens, becoming more like a lullaby than a lecture. You find yourself smiling, eyes half closed, letting the sound of words and soft laughter wash over you like a second bath, this time of language. Eventually, the philosopher lowers his voice, signaling the end of his performance. A few scattered claps echo softly, more polite than enthusiastic. The crowd begins to disperse, stretching and yawning as they drift toward the outer chambers. You rise slowly, your body still warm from the lingering heat. You glance back at the philosopher, who offers you a small nod before turning to gather his things. You move toward the next archway, your mind swirling with thoughts of steam oil and rivers you can never step into twice. Somewhere beyond these walls, Rome still pulses with life. But in here, the night feels suspended, stretched thin like a delicate mosaic, waiting to be pieced together. You wonder what's next. You've heard whispers of strange beauty rituals in the next room. Hair removal of all things. Because apparently no Roman evening is complete without a little pain for the sake of vanity. You drift through another dim corridor, rubbing your fingertips along the cool stone wall as you go. You're not exactly in a hurry, but curiosity tugs you forward. You've heard the rumors the Romans took grooming seriously, and tonight, you're about to find out just how far they were willing to go for smooth, hairless skin. The next chamber is smaller than the others, lit by soft golden lamplight that casts long shadows on the walls. You hear it before you fully step inside the unmistakable snap of tweezers, the soft groans of bathers enduring their turn on the hair removal bench. Yes, you found the barber's corner. You hover at the entrance for a moment, watching as an older man sits hunched on a stool, while a barber holding a small pair of bronze tweezers works his way methodically up the man's arm, plucking tiny hairs one by one. The man winces but doesn't flinch. You figure he must have done this 100 times before. A younger bather nearby isn't so lucky. He's clearly new to this ritual, squirming and muttering curses under his breath with each sharp tug. You can't help but grin. Looks like you're not the only one second-guessing their life choices tonight. You edge closer, eyeing the tools of the trade. The barbers here carry small kits, bronze tweezers, tiny knives for trimming nails, and little pots of perfumed oils. Everything laid out with the precision of a battlefield. One of the attendants catches your gaze and gestures toward an empty spot on a bench. You hesitate. Do you really need this? You glance around, noticing the number of men with completely smooth chests, arms, and legs. Apparently, hairless skin is the mark of civilization here in Rome, something that separates the refined from the barbarians beyond the empire's borders. Historians still debate whether this obsession with body hair was purely aesthetic or rooted in deeper cultural ideals. Was it about hygiene, status, vanity? No one really agrees, but one thing is certain: the Romans took their grooming personally. You sigh softly, stepping forward. You settle onto the bench and brace yourself as the barber approaches with a little too much enthusiasm in his grin. He starts with your forearm, pinching and plucking with practiced precision. You flinch at the first few tugs, biting your lip to keep from making a sound. The barber hums quietly to himself, as if enjoying your discomfort just a little too much. Nearby, another bather chuckles, leaning toward you. First time he asks, just as someone had earlier in the gambling corner. You manage a tense nod. He waves a dismissive hand. The first time's the worst. After that, you barely notice. You're not convinced. The barber continues moving to your shoulders, your chest, even the backs of your hands. You lose count of how many tiny hairs he pulls. You try to focus on anything else: the flickering lamp on the wall, the faint sound of water dripping somewhere nearby, the steady rhythm of distant footsteps. A woman seated nearby is having her legs waxed with resin and cloth strips her face, the picture of pure determination. You hear the rip of the cloth and wince for her, but she doesn't flinch. She leans back with a soft, satisfied sigh, like she's just won a small private battle. You shift on the bench, already regretting your life choices, but too stubborn to back out now. The barber finishes with a final snap of the tweezers, then dabs a bit of rose-scented oil on your skin. The sting softens slightly, replaced by a faint floral warmth. You exhale through your nose, wondering if it was all worth it. As you stand, you catch sight of yourself reflected faintly in the polished bronze of a water jug. Your skin is smooth, shiny with oil, and if you're being honest, you do look oddly refined. You brush your hands down your arms, shaking your head with a quiet laugh. Looks like you've officially been Romanized. The barber waves you off with a nod, already turning to his next customer. You stretch your arms, rolling your shoulders to shake off the tension. The crowd here is thinner now. People seem to be drifting toward the exit or settling into quieter corners of the bathhouse. You follow the flow, moving slowly back toward the main hall where you first entered. As you walk, you notice something you hadn't paid much attention to before the walls. Carved into the stone and scratched into the plaster are dozens of little markings. Names, jokes, crude sketches, graffiti, the ancient kind. You stop in front of one particularly elaborate doodle, a cartoonish figure of a man slipping on a wet floor, his legs flailing in the air. Below it, someone has scrawled a warning in Latin. "Watch your step, fool." You grin, tracing the outline with your finger. Apparently not much has changed in 2,000 years. The more you look, the more you find. Little love notes, political slogans, badly drawn animals. You even spot a tiny carving of a gladiator's helmet with the words, "Valerius was here" scratched beneath it. Historians still argue whether this graffiti was tolerated, encouraged, or quietly ignored by the bathhouse staff. But standing here, running your fingers over the rough carvings, you can't help but feel like you've stumbled into the whispered voice of everyday Romans people, just like you, trying to leave their mark on the world, even if it's just a scratch on a stone wall. You step back, giving the graffiti one last glance before moving on. Somewhere ahead, you hear quiet murmurs again, this time not philosophers or gamblers, but whispers of scandal and secret deals. Because in Rome, even the bathhouse has its politics. You wander toward a quieter hallway, the air growing still again. There's something different here. The hum of casual chatter has softened, replaced by something lower, quieter, and much more deliberate. You pause just inside a small side chamber, partially hidden from the main flow of the bathhouse. Only a few figures linger here, huddled in tight circles, their heads bowed together, speaking in tones too soft to carry. You sense it immediately. This isn't public debate or playful gossip. This is where deals are made. The Romans, you've learned by now, have a saying, "In vino veritas," in wine there is truth. But here in the dim corners of the bathhouse, the wine isn't the only thing loosening tongues. You slide onto a nearby bench, keeping your posture casual, your gaze unfocused, but your ears tuned. To your left, two men, one heavy set with the senator's posture, the other wiry and plainly dressed, are locked in a whispered negotiation. You catch only fragments, land deals, debt repayment. Someone's name mentioned twice with the tone that suggests blackmail isn't off the table. One of them leans closer, glancing over his shoulder before lowering his voice further. You strain to hear, but catch only the end of a sentence. "If the governor never hears of it." Classic. You stifle a grin, careful not to draw attention. Roman politics never sleeps, not even in the bathhouse. Across the room, a pair of women wrapped loosely in linen robes are locked in their own quiet argument. Their faces are tight with tension. You hear snippets of the words inheritance and petition. Their voices rise for just a heartbeat before softening again. You wonder if they're here to resolve a family dispute or to stir one up. Historians still argue whether real power moves happened in these steam-soaked walls, or if stories of bathhouse conspiracies have been exaggerated over time. But tonight, watching the body language, the flickering glances, and the way hands disappear beneath robes to pass coins or sealed scrolls, you're inclined to believe it all. A tall man in a dark cloak moves past you, trailing the faint scent of myrrh oil. He pauses by the entrance, scanning the room with practiced eyes. Something about him feels official. A messenger. A spy. You can't be sure. He exchanges a small nod with a heavy-set senator before slipping silently through another archway, disappearing into the bathhouse maze. The wiry man leans back, stretching his arms as if the whole exchange never happened. He catches your eye for just a moment. You look away, feigning disinterest, your heart suddenly a little louder in your chest. You shift on the bench, wondering just how many lives have been quietly bought, sold, or ruined in this very spot. Off to the side, another small group sits cross-legged on the floor, passing a clay tablet back and forth. You catch sight of what looks like property records, a list of names and numbers etched in faint script. One of them points to a name, tapping it twice with the tip of his finger before sliding the tablet toward his companion. You realize you're watching something like real estate trading happening right here in nothing but towels and sandals, only in Rome. You stand slowly stretching your back. You've heard enough. Whatever's happening here, it's way above your pay grade. As you turn to leave, you pass a wall covered in tiny, almost invisible scratches. Not graffiti this time, but markings you recognize from earlier visits to the forum, secret signs used by certain merchant guilds to signal private deals. A fish, a crescent moon, a pair of crossed daggers. You run your fingers over them, wondering who left these here and what they mean to the right pair of eyes. The weight of the room seems to press a little heavier on your shoulders now. You slip back into the main corridor, shaking off the lingering tension like water clinging to your skin. The bathhouse isn't all scandal and schemes after all. Somewhere beyond these walls there are workers, the silent force that keeps this place alive, hauling water-stoking fires, carrying towels. You glance toward the far end of the hall where a group of servants and slaves move in and out of a low arch, their arms loaded with bundles of cloth and amphorae of oil. Their faces are blank, their footsteps practiced. You realize you've barely noticed them all night. Maybe it's time you did. You slow your pace, stepping to the side to let a pair of servants pass. One carries a towering stack of towels on his shoulder. The other balances a clay jug nearly as tall as your torso. Neither makes eye contact. Neither pauses. They move like clockwork, gliding through the corridors with the kind of efficiency only learned through repetition without reward. You've heard whispers before how Rome's mighty bathhouses run not on marble and engineering alone, but on the backs of slaves and low-paid workers whose names never make it onto the inscriptions or the official records. You follow at a safe distance, observing as they move through a narrow service corridor, half hidden behind a tapestry of fading laurel wreaths. You slip through after them, curiosity pulling you toward the beating heart of the bathhouse, the part most patrons never bother to notice. The air shifts again. It's warmer here, but not from the baths. The heat is dry, thick with the scent of burning wood and damp stone. You hear it before you see it, the low, rhythmic thump of someone shoveling fuel into the unseen fires below. You've stumbled into the service tunnels, the veins running beneath the bathhouse floor. Ahead, a young boy barely older than 10 pushes a heavy cart loaded with logs toward a stone archway, where flickering light spills into the darkness. His face is slick with sweat, his tunic sticking to his back. He stops to wipe his brow on his forearm before continuing without a sound. You step closer, peeking through the arch to find a team of stokers working beside the massive hypocaust furnace, the hidden engine that keeps the caldarium scalding hot, and the floors pleasantly warm. Flames lick the edges of the stone chamber, casting everything in a soft golden glow. The men move with practiced precision, feeding wood into the fire, adjusting stone vents, wiping soot from their arms. You catch the faintest exchange between two of them, one complaining softly that the fire master hasn't let them take a break since sunrise, Historians still argue whether these furnace workers were specialists or simply disposable labor, traded like tools and forgotten just as quickly. Standing here watching their silent choreography, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. Without them, the bathhouse wouldn't function. Yet here they are, invisible to the crowds above. You step back, letting the weight of that realization settle on your shoulders. Turning to leave, you nearly collide with a Capsarius, a towel boy, no more than 13, carrying a basket of small leather pouches. He freezes for a heartbeat, eyes wide, clearly startled to see someone like you here. You offer a small apologetic nod, stepping aside to let him pass. He darts past you without a word, disappearing down another darkened hallway. You follow the winding path back toward the main chambers, passing more silent workers along the way. Some gathering discarded strigils, others scrubbing the walls with rough cloths, their hands raw and reddened. No applause waits for them. No audience gathers to watch. As you re-enter the public corridor, the noise swells again. Voices, laughter, the distant clink of clay cups. It feels almost jarring, like stepping back onto a stage after sneaking behind the curtain. You glance over your shoulder once more, the quiet shadows of the workers lingering in your mind. You wonder how many visitors walk these halls without ever realizing who keeps the fires burning, who hauls the oil, who carries the sweat-soaked towels. You make a silent promise to remember them, not just the marble statues or the senators lounging on velvet cushions, but the invisible hands that keep this grand machine alive. As you move on, you pass another familiar face, one of the Capsari you'd paid earlier to watch your belongings. He catches your eye and gives you a small nod. You return the gesture, oddly relieved to see him still guarding the shelf beneath the mosaic of Neptune. And just like that, the maze of steam and stone pulls you back in. Your body is tired now, but your mind is still alert. You've seen the front stage and the backstage. You've tasted the food, heard the gossip, felt the sting of vanity. And somewhere ahead, you hear the low crackle of fire again, not from the hypocaust, but from the furnace rooms themselves. It's time to venture below to the hottest, most dangerous part of the entire bathhouse. The entrance to the furnace rooms isn't marked. There are no grand mosaics here, no arches carved with the faces of gods. Just a low, narrow opening near the service corridor where the smell of burning wood and scorched stone grows stronger with every step you take. You duck your head, stepping into the passage. The temperature rises immediately, wrapping around you like the heat from a blacksmith's forge. The floor beneath your feet feels almost too hot, forcing you to step carefully, as if crossing sun-baked stone in the peak of a Roman summer. Ahead, the tunnel widens into a low-ceilinged chamber, glowing orange from the firelight flickering beyond the arch. You pause in the shadows, watching as a team of stokers work the great furnace, feeding it, fanning it, commanding it like some beast that refuses to rest. The furnace itself is enormous, built deep into the wall, its mouth wide open, revealing roaring flames licking the stone. Slaves and workers move in a constant loop, shoveling fuel, adjusting the airflow, wiping soot from their arms with already blackened cloths. You step closer, wiping the sweat from your brow. The heat here is unforgiving, far worse than the caldarium above. You wonder how long these men last before the heat takes them down. Hours, days. You spot a small pile of water jars in the corner, each man taking quick, desperate sips between trips to the fire. One worker stumbles, catching himself on the stone wall. His companion reaches out, steadying him with a grunt. They exchange no words, just a brief nod before returning to their rhythm. You can almost hear their thoughts. Keep moving, keep breathing, keep the fire alive. You notice the pipes and channels running from the furnace, disappearing beneath the floor toward the bathhouse above. This is the hypocaust system, Rome's ingenious underfloor heating network. Hot air from the furnace travels through these hidden passages, warming the floors and walls of the baths. without ever revealing itself to the guests lounging in comfort above. Historians still debate whether this system was truly reliable or if bathhouses like this were constantly battling uneven heat-cold spots and dangerous pressure buildups. You wouldn't be surprised if the engineers were still tinkering with it long after the grand opening celebrations had ended. You glance toward the far end of the furnace room, where a narrow stone staircase leads even deeper underground. You hesitate. The air feels thinner here, heavier with smoke and soot. But curiosity wins again. You descend carefully, gripping the wall for balance. The temperature spikes with every step, the sound of crackling flames echoing louder. You emerge into a cramped maintenance tunnel, just tall enough to walk hunched over. Here you find the stoker's tools. Long iron pokers, baskets of wood chips, and piles of split logs stacked nearly to the ceiling. The walls are slick with soot, the air thick with the taste of ash. A slave boy no older than 12 passes you, balancing a bucket of charcoal on his shoulder. He doesn't even glance your way. His face is blank, his steps automatic. You feel the weight of that silence pressing on your chest. The deeper you go, the more you begin to understand the true cost of Roman luxury. Above bathers laugh, argue, and sip honeyed wine, completely unaware of the endless, grueling work happening just beneath their feet. You finally stop in front of a ventilation shaft, peeking through the slats. You catch a glimpse of the caldarium high above, steam rising through the gaps, light flickering on damp skin and golden mosaics. So close, yet worlds apart. You lean back, pressing your palms against the warm stone wall. You can feel the heartbeat of the bathhouse here, not in the laughter or the splashing water, but in the relentless roar of the furnace fed by hands that never stop moving. A flicker of movement catches your eye. The firemaster, a tall, broad-shouldered man with arms blackened by years of soot and sweat, steps into view. His eyes sweep the chamber, catching sight of you almost immediately. His brow furrows, and for a moment you wonder if you've overstepped. But instead of shouting or chasing you off, he simply gives a small, almost imperceptible nod before turning back to his men. You let out a slow breath, quietly stepping back toward the staircase. As you climb, the air cools with every step, the roar of the furnace fading into a low, distant hum. When you emerge back into the corridor, the bathhouse feels different now. Not less grand, but somehow more honest. The marble walls, the mosaics, the flickering oil lamps, they're all part of the performance. But you've seen behind the curtain. You know what fuels it all. You wipe your hands on your thighs, your skin still slick with a thin layer of soot and sweat. You glance toward the main hall where the air feels cleaner, the lighting softer, the voices lighter. It's almost time to move on. You've heard stories about the healing powers of the baths, how doctors prescribe steamy chambers and cold plunges as cures for just about everything. And apparently tonight is no exception. You rejoin the quieter traffic flowing toward the eastern wing of the complex, following snippets of conversation about remedies, treatments, and strange prescriptions. It seems you've wandered into the bathhouse's unofficial clinic, a space where Roman physicians and self-proclaimed healers offer their expertise, some more reputable than others. A painted wooden sign above the archway reads, Valetudinarium, though you suspect that's a generous title. You step inside to find a series of stone benches, low tables, and baskets filled with dried herbs oils and curiously shaped tools that look more experimental than medical. At the far end of the chamber, a physician in a deep green robe is lecturing a half-circle of bathers on the virtues of steam. You catch just enough to realize he's claiming it can cure everything from sore joints to infertility. You raise an eyebrow. Bold promise. He gestures toward a nearby herbalist, a middle-aged woman, grinding something that smells like rosemary and vinegar into a paste. She scoops the mixture into small clay pots, stacking them like prizes at a festival. A bather beside you mutters under his breath, 4 sesterces for boiled weeds. What a bargain. You try not to smile. The physician moves closer to the center of the room, holding up a small bronze rod with a rounded end. For toothache, he announces dramatically, place this on the sore spot after heating it gently. Instant relief. Someone in the back snickers or instant blisters. Historians still argue whether these remedies were based on real knowledge or clever salesmanship. The line between medicine and theater is paper thin here. You make your way toward a smaller table where another healer offers cupping therapy. Small glass and clay cups are arranged in neat rows, their rims blackened from fire. A young man lies on his stomach, his back covered with cups, sealed tightly to his skin, leaving round dark marks that look more like a rash than a cure. The healer explains that the suction draws out bad humors, balancing the body's energies. The patient winces with every cup, though he nods along as if this is perfectly normal. You suspect he's trying to convince himself more than anyone else. You pass another table where a man is selling amulets claiming they protect against fevers and evil spirits. Tiny carvings of figs, phalluses, and eyes dangle from a string. You run your fingers over one shaped like a clenched fist. The seller leans in and whispers, guaranteed to ward off bad luck, or your coin back. You're starting to think the real sickness here might be gullibility. You continue toward the corner of the chamber where a more serious-looking physician stands, carefully measuring infused wine into tiny cups. You overhear him prescribing it for insomnia, claiming the warmth, combined with the herbal blend, calms the mind. A woman sitting nearby leans over and whispers, "Don't drink too much. You'll wake up with a head heavier than Caesar's ego." You exchange amused glances, grateful to have found at least one fellow skeptic in the crowd. As you watch a mother and her young son approach the physician, the boy clutching his elbow. The physician examines the arm prods gently and murmurs something about muscle strain from too much wrestling. He prescribes hot compresses and a bath in the coldarium, as if anyone needs more reason to return to the steam. You feel a flicker of something you hadn't expected respect. Amid the charlatans and salesmen, there are still people here trying to help, however crude their methods might seem by modern standards. You pause near the exit, glancing back at the room one last time. You wonder how many Romans leave here feeling better simply because they believe they've been treated, not because the treatment actually worked. Placebo or not, it's all part of the ritual. The bathhouse offers more than just heat and water. It sells the illusion of restoration, of walking back into the streets of Rome, somehow renewed. You step back into the main corridor, your skin still tingling slightly from the warmth of the room. The air feels lighter, almost playful, as music drifts toward you from the next hall. Someone's plucking a lyre, their voice weaving through the laughter and soft clapping of an unseen audience. Looks like you've just stumbled into tonight's entertainment. The music grows clearer as you make your way down the corridor. It's light, delicate, the kind of melody that seems to float on the steam itself. You follow the sound, drawn toward a chamber glowing with the soft flicker of oil lamps and small, carefully placed braziers. As you enter, you find yourself among another gathering this time, not of gamblers, philosophers, or schemers, but of spectators. In the center of the space stands a musician, a slender woman with tightly coiled hair, pinned back with bronze combs. She plucks a lyre strung with fine gut strings, her voice smooth and rhythmic, as she sings a poem that you recognize from Virgil's Aeneid. You find an empty spot along the wall and slide down onto a warm bench. Around you, bathers lean forward, some resting their chins on their hands, others with eyes half closed, swaying gently to the rhythm. It feels strangely intimate, like the bathhouse has transformed into someone's private garden party. The woman finishes her verse, bowing slightly to soft applause. A few bathers toss coins into a shallow basket at her feet, before she launches into another melody, this one faster, more playful. The tension in the room seems to melt, replaced by the kind of lazy contentment that makes time stretch thin. You glance around, noticing other entertainers mingling along the edges of the crowd. One man juggles small clay balls, weaving between the seated guests with the kind of effortless grace that makes it look too easy. Another pair, a woman and a young boy, perform a quiet shadow play on the wall, using nothing but their hands and the flickering lamplight to create figures of birds, wolves, and mythic beasts. The audience watches with quiet amusement, the soft clapping rising and falling like waves on a shore. A vendor slips through the crowd, balancing a tray of honeyed almonds and spiced figs. You wave him over and exchange a few small coins for a handful of almonds, their sticky sweetness coating your fingers as you snack quietly. As the music swells again, you spot a small group of bathers, seated near the far wall, whispering among themselves. One gestures toward the entrance, glancing around nervously. You recognize the signs. Another secret meeting, perhaps. Seems the entertainment provides the perfect cover for deals that prefer to stay hidden in plain sight. Historians still argue whether these performances were officially sanctioned by the Bathhouse, or simply tolerated as long as the crowd stayed peaceful. You suspect it doesn't matter. Rome loves a show, and the Bathhouse is no exception. The musician shifts again this time, plucking a slower, more haunting melody. Her voice softens, filling the room with something that feels older than Rome itself. A lullaby, maybe, or a hymn to forgotten gods. The audience grows still, leaning in as if afraid to break the spell. You let your eyes drift closed for a moment, swaying with the melody. The warmth of the air, the sweetness of the almonds, the soft rhythm of the music, it all blurs together into something dreamlike. When the song ends, the applause is even softer than before, as if no one wants to break the fragile peace. The musician gathers her lyre and basket, slipping away as quietly as she arrived. The other performers follow, leaving the audience to stretch, yawn, and murmur softly among themselves. You rise, brushing your hands on your thighs. You feel lighter somehow, as if the music has lifted something off your shoulders you didn't realize you were carrying. But the night isn't over yet. You've heard whispers some Romans bring their gods with them into the bathhouse. Tiny statues whispered prayers, quiet rituals performed in secret. Not everyone approves, of course. The old moralists complain about mixing pleasure with piety. Still, the curiosity is too much to resist. You move toward another chamber, following faint traces of incense and low murmured chants. You have a feeling you're about to witness something few visitors ever notice. A private kind of worship hidden in the steam. The bathhouse grows quieter the deeper you walk. The familiar hum of conversation fades into soft whispered prayers, and the scent of burning incense thickens the air. You step lightly now, feeling almost as if you're intruding on something sacred, though no official temple marks this part of the complex. You pause outside a smaller chamber, its entrance half curtained by a woven cloth painted with simple olive branches. No guards stand here, no attendants usher people through. This isn't a public space, it feels invitation only, though no one stops you from slipping inside. The air changes immediately. You're met with a faint glow of small oil lamps placed in neat rows along the floor. Between them stand tiny statues, household gods or lares, their worn faces barely visible in the flickering light. You recognize Mercury by his winged sandals, Venus by the curve of her form, and what you assume is Bacchus holding a tiny cup. A handful of worshippers kneel on woven mats before these miniature shrines. Some whisper, heads bowed. Others sit in silence, eyes closed, breathing slow and deep, as if trying to sync their heartbeat with the rhythm of the air. You step quietly toward an empty space near the wall and lower yourself down, careful not to disturb the soft murmur of the room. You don't recognize the words being spoken, perhaps personal prayers or fragments of old hymns. No loud declarations here, No temple priests in flowing robes, just ordinary Romans offering quiet devotion in the midst of marble and steam. You spot a young woman pressing a small coin to the base of a statue, whispering something you can't quite hear. She holds her hand to her chest for a long moment, before rising and slipping out, leaving the coin behind like a silent signature. Nearby, a middle-aged man lights a sprig of dried laurel and waves the smoke over a small carved figure of Fortuna, goddess of luck. His lips move silently, his expression unreadable. You wonder if he's praying for a business deal, a safe journey, or perhaps forgiveness for something whispered in the darker corners of the bathhouse earlier tonight. Historians still argue whether these private shrines were officially sanctioned by the city, or tolerated only as long as they didn't disrupt the larger rituals of Rome. Some writers mock these bathhouse worshippers as superstitious fools, blending piety with pleasure in the same breath. But sitting here in the soft lamplight, it feels less like foolishness and more like habit. A quiet tether to something bigger than steam and stone. A man beside you, his skin still slick from the caldarium, traces the outline of a small bronze fish hanging from a leather cord around his neck. He closes his eyes and mouths a few words before slipping the amulet back beneath his robe. You recognize the symbol, not Roman, but Christian. Dangerous, depending on who sees it. You glance away, giving him his privacy. You've heard the complaints, the grumblings of old senators and philosophers who claim Rome has grown too soft, too tolerant, letting strange cults and foreign gods slip through the cracks. But here in this quiet chamber, it doesn't feel like rebellion or weakness. It feels like people trying to believe in something, anything, to anchor themselves in the swirling uncertainty of life in the empire. You let your gaze drift over the statues once more. Venus Mercury, Bacchus Fortuna, and wonder what prayers you'd leave here if you had the courage to speak them aloud. The curtain rustles softly as another figure slips through the entrance. You rise, giving a final glance to the tiny altars before stepping back into the corridor. The bathhouse feels bigger now, not just a place of water and heat, but a strange mosaic of lives, beliefs, and whispered hopes, all woven together beneath these ancient arches. You stretch your arms overhead, rolling your shoulders as you move toward the center of the complex, where the grand halls hum softly, lit by towering windows that catch the last light of the evening. You've walked the shadows. You've heard the prayers. Now it's time to marvel at the architecture itself. Rome's greatest flex, carved in stone and crowned in glass. You step back into the main gallery, blinking as your eyes adjust to the brighter light, pouring through the enormous arched windows high above. The steam has thinned here, giving way to the full scale of Roman architectural ambition on display. And what a display it is. Towering columns, each carved with winding bands of vine and laurel, line the vast hall like a forest of stone. The ceiling so high it almost feels like open sky as a masterpiece of coffered vaulting. Each recessed panel catching the golden glow of oil lamps, set in iron sconces along the walls. You tilt your head back, breath catching slightly in your throat. You've walked through forums and basilicas before, but this feels different. Less like a civic space and more like a cathedral to leisure itself. Every inch of this place whispers power. Not just political power, but engineering power. The raw confidence of a city that believes it can conquer the known world and make luxury public while doing it. You run your fingers along the smooth, cold surface of a nearby marble column, marveling at the sheer scale of the thing. How did they transport this from the quarries? How many laborers hauled it, shaped it, raised it into place? Historians still argue whether the construction of Rome's great bathhouses drained the empire's coffers or stood as living proof of its unstoppable reach. You suspect it's a bit of both. You wander further into the gallery, your footsteps echoing faintly off the mosaic floor beneath you. Another masterpiece in its own right. Tiny tiles barely larger than grains of barley arranged in sprawling scenes of myth and legend. Neptune commanding the seas. Mars leading legions into battle. Venus reclining among roses. You pause in front of one panel that catches your eye, an intricate map of the Roman Empire. Tiny cities and rivers flowing across the floor like veins. From Britannia to Egypt, from Hispania to the Black Sea. The whole empire laid out beneath your feet, reminding every bather that Rome rules it all. You trace the edge of the mosaic with your toe, wondering how many others have stood here dreaming of distant provinces they'll never see. Your gaze lifts again to the towering walls where massive glass windows filter the fading sunlight into long, soft beams. Glass, real transparent glass, a luxury in itself, imported from the eastern provinces, no doubt. You step into one of the golden shafts of light, letting it warm your skin. It feels almost like standing on stage, the empire itself watching. Near the center of the hall stands a massive fountain water cascading from the mouths of stone dolphins into a wide marble basin. You wander toward it, dipping your fingers into the cool stream. The water catches the light, sending tiny reflections dancing across the ceiling like shimmering fish. You lean on the edge of the fountain for a moment, closing your eyes. You let the sound of water fill your ears, a steady rhythmic hum that feels more ancient than the stone itself. Off to the side, a group of architects you assume are huddled over a wax tablet, gesturing toward the columns and debating something with quiet intensity. One of them jabs a stylus toward the ceiling, muttering about weight distribution and vault integrity. You catch the phrase the next one will be even grander. You can't help but smile. Of course it will. Rome always builds bigger. A pair of guards stroll past their short swords clinking softly against their belts. Not in armor, this isn't a barracks, but their presence reminds you that order even here is enforced. You wonder how often they have to step in. Fights, theft. Political arguments taken too far. You make a mental note to stay out of their way. You turn back toward the fountain, watching as a small child no more than 6 reaches up on tiptoes to splash his hands in the water, giggling softly before his mother gently pulls him back. You take another slow breath, filling your lungs with the warm, mineral-scented air. It's strange. You came here expecting a simple bath, a quick rinse, maybe a quiet soak. Instead, you've walked the entire map of Roman society, from oiling rooms to furnaces, from dice games to whispered prayers, from bruising massages to delicate music. And now you stand here in the heart of it all, under stone and glass that seems to stretch time itself. But the empire doesn't stop at Rome. Word has it bathhouses just like this have begun to spread across the provinces, to Gaul, to Africa, to the edges of Britannia. You wonder how those distant versions compare. Smaller, rougher, or perhaps just as grand, carrying the same rituals to places most Romans will never set foot. The thought stirs your feet again. Time to explore beyond the capital's walls, at least in your mind. You push away from the fountain and head toward the outer corridors, already imagining the provincial bathhouses, waiting on the empire's distant shores. As you make your way toward the far side of the gallery, you notice a small frescoed map on the wall, framed by carved columns. It catches your attention not just for its artistry, but because it marks the locations of other bathhouses, sprawling centers of heat and water scattered all across the empire. You step closer, tracing the painted routes from Rome to Carthage, from Alexandria to Londinium. You've heard stories of these provincial bathhouses, how they mirror the capital's design, yet carry the flavors and quirks of their local cultures. You press on, letting your imagination carry you out of Rome and into the fringes of the empire. First, you picture North Africa, where the desert heat makes the steamy caldarium almost redundant. The bathhouses there, you've heard, often have open courtyards shaded with palm fronds, The mosaics featuring lions and camels instead of dolphins and sea nymphs. The scent of cedarwood and spiced oils fills the air, borrowed from the bustling markets nearby. You imagine stepping into one of those baths, hearing a blend of Latin and Punic local dialects dancing alongside imperial orders. The routines might be the same oil strigil steam, but the faces and stories would be entirely different. Then your mind drifts north to the cold, windswept lands of Britannia. You've heard Roman soldiers stationed there joke that the bathhouses are the only thing keeping them sane in the endless rain and mud. You picture crude stone walls, smaller pools, perhaps less marble and more local limestone, but the ritual still intact. Oil still poured, strigils still scraping, laughter still rising through the steam. Historians still argue whether these provincial bathhouses truly match the grandeur of Rome's, or if they were merely functional imitations, little outposts of culture trying to civilize the wild edges of the empire. You suspect they carried a bit of both the bones of Roman tradition dressed in local skin. You continue walking, imagining Gallic bathhouses where Celtic patterns are worked into mosaics, or Syrian baths where the air smells faintly of myrrh and sandalwood, blending east and west in the very air itself. You picture Egyptian bathhouses near Alexandria, where Greek scholars might debate geometry in one corner, while Egyptian merchants argue over grain prices in another. You've heard of their colored glass windows, casting strange, soft light over the steam painting bathers in shades of emerald and ruby. You pass through another small arch and into a hallway decorated with inscriptions left by governors and military commanders who funded or dedicated bathhouses far from Rome's heart. You run your fingers over one that reads, "To the people of Lutetia, a gift from Marcus Valerius Primus, proconsul of Gaul." Lutetia, modern-day Paris, if you remember correctly. You wonder if the bathhouse still stands there, its walls weathered, but still echoing with the ghostly hum of long-forgotten bathers. It occurs to you that wherever these bathhouses stand, they've carried more than just architecture, they've carried habits, rituals, memories. People across the empire, from senators to slaves, all stripping off their tunics, stepping into steam, scraping oil from their skin and whispering deals or prayers in the hazy half-light. And here you are tracing their footsteps, realizing that the ritual feels bigger than any one city. It's a network, a rhythm that pulses across the empire like blood through its veins. You turn a corner and pause as you spot a traveler. His leather sandals caked in dust, recounting his recent visit to a bathhouse in Ephesus. His audience leans in as he describes the massive marble columns, the open-air pools, and the music drifting from the hillside temples nearby. He laughs, claiming it wasn't as good as Rome's, but you can hear the affection in his voice. You move on, wondering how far these customs will travel. Will bathhouses rise even beyond the empire's borders one day? Will future generations reinvent these rituals in ways none of you could imagine? You exhale softly, feeling the weight of two worlds, the one you know and the one yet to come. You turn back toward the main gallery, the familiar scent of steam and stone wrapping around you once more. You've traveled the empire in your mind tonight, but the heart of the bathhouse still beats here beneath Rome's towering arches. As you step back into the light, you hear a quieter hum. The baths are emptying. The energy has shifted. The night is winding down, and so you realize is the empire itself. You feel the change almost before you see it. The steam hangs a little lower. The laughter sounds a little thinner. The benches that once overflowed with bathers now sit half empty. The massive halls feel quieter, as if the building itself is breathing slower. You wander deeper into the gallery, noticing more than a few cracked tiles, faded frescoes, and sections of mosaic where tiny pieces have long since fallen away. Once this place would have been crawling with workers to patch every flaw, polish every stone, keep every edge sharp. But now, you see the signs of neglect. Rome's mighty bathhouses, symbols of power, wealth, and civilization, are showing their age. You overhear a pair of older bathers discussing the cost of repairs, one shaking his head with a heavy sigh. "The funds are drying up," he mutters. "The grain ships come late. The taxes come early. Always the same." His companion simply shrugs, staring down at the cracked marble beneath his feet. You pass by a once grand fountain, now dry. Its stone dolphins frozen mid-leap, their mouths empty. The absence of water feels louder than the splashing ever did. You spot a few attendants older than you'd expect moving slowly as they gather stray towels and empty amphorae. Their movements lack the energy you saw earlier in the night. You wonder if the owners have cut staff, another quiet sign that the golden days of Rome's public baths might be slipping away. Historians still debate when exactly the baths began to decline. Some say it was the empire's financial strain, unable to fund such massive public works. Others blame the changing morals as Christian leaders began to criticize the nudity indulgence and pagan rituals that once filled these steamy halls. Still others argue it was the barbarian invasions, the shifting of power, the slow unraveling of the roads and trade routes that once brought wealth pouring into the city. Whatever the cause, you can feel it here tonight. Not dramatic, not sudden, but like a slow, invisible rot beneath the marble skin. You continue walking, passing a few bathers who linger by the empty fountain. One of them, a woman with streaks of silver in her hair, runs her hand along the dry basin's edge. You catch her whispering softly, almost as if speaking to the building itself. You can't hear the words, but the way she presses her palm to the stone feels like goodbye. You move on, passing another corridor where a mosaic repair seems to have been abandoned mid-process. Loose tiles scatter the floor like spilled seeds, the half-finished image frozen in time. A half-formed face, a missing hand. Another project left unfinished. And yet, people still come? You see them fewer now, but still here. A father helping his son wash off in the frigidarium. A pair of lovers sharing a quiet word on a stone bench. A lonely philosopher pacing the perimeter, still arguing with ghosts no one else can hear. The bathhouse isn't dead, not yet, but it's changing. You glance toward the main archway where the massive bronze doors stand half closed. You realize you've been here for hours, maybe longer. Time has blurred, stretched thin like steam on a winter morning. You feel it in your bones, the weight of a world trying to hold itself together with tradition, ritual, and memory. You wonder how many more years this bathhouse will stand before its walls crumble and its fountains dry for good. And yet, as you run your hand along the cool marble railing, you realize something else. These walls have already outlived hundreds of bathers. Generations of laughter, whispers, arguments, and stolen glances. Every tile, every crack, every whisper of steam has carried stories not of emperors or wars, but of ordinary people like you, stepping into the heat, searching for relief, for company, for something more. You step toward the exit, hearing the soft clack of sandals on stone as other bathers begin to gather their things. You can almost feel the bathhouse exhaling, letting go of another day. But before you leave, something pulls you back toward the emptying pools, toward the places you've walked tonight. Because something tells you the bathhouse still has one last memory to leave with you. Your feet seem to carry you back without thinking, retracing your earlier steps through the quieting halls. You pass the darkened papina, now nearly empty save for a single vendor, stacking empty clay cups. You glance into the tepidarium where only a handful of bathers remain lounging with the kind of heavy-lidded stillness that comes when the night stretches long enough to blur into tomorrow. But it's the graffiti wall that draws you back, the rough, worn surface carved by 100 different hands across decades, maybe centuries. You stand in front of it again, running your fingers over the faint grooves, names, symbols, bad jokes. Scandalous sketches, love notes, warnings. Tiny human fingerprints left behind by people you'll never meet, people whose laughter has long since faded into the stone. You spot a fresh set of scratches that you swear wasn't there earlier. Just 2 words. She smiled. Simple, strange, perfectly human. It strikes you how little these marks really change over time. Historians argue whether this graffiti was tolerated, ignored, or scrubbed away by disapproving attendants. But it's here still speaking in soft, crooked lines long after the authors are gone. And for the first time all night, you feel like adding something yourself. You glance around, no one seems to notice you standing there, fingertip hovering over a smooth patch of plaster. You hesitate, wondering what to write. Your name too obvious, a joke too forgettable. Instead, you lean in and trace 3 small, simple lines, a ripple pattern like water in the frigidarium. You smile softly, knowing no one else will recognize it but you. A private signature in a public place. A reminder that you stood here breathing this air, walking these halls, soaking in the same heat that wrapped itself around 1,000 others before you. You step back, letting your hand fall to your side. The bathhouse is almost empty now. You hear attendants gathering the last few towels, scraping the floors, whispering to one another about the long walk home. The great bronze doors creak a little wider as a final few bathers slip into the night. But something draws you toward the edge of the baths one last time. You find yourself standing at the rim of the caldarium's largest pool, the water still faintly rippling beneath the dim lamplight. You crouch down, dipping your fingers into the warmth. The heat is softer now, less aggressive, almost tender. You lean in closer, letting the steam rise around your face. You close your eyes and take a deep, steady breath, filling your lungs one last time with the scent of stone water and oil. You picture the bathhouses in distant provinces, the scattered marks on the empire's vast map. You picture the builders, the workers, the gamblers, the thinkers, the lovers, the lonely ones who've come here again and again for reasons they probably couldn't explain any more than you could. You rise slowly, feeling the weight of the night settle across your shoulders, not heavy but full. As you turn toward the exit, you hear someone near the door call out softly, "Last call." You smile, knowing your part in this ancient ritual is done for now. You step through the great bronze doors, the cool night air wrapping around you like a fresh cloak. The streets of Rome stretch out ahead, dark and humming softly under the stars. And just as you're about to leave, you glance back one last time. The bathhouse stands silent, its marble walls glowing faintly in the moonlight, holding every whispered story within its steam-soaked heart. You let out a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding. Tomorrow the fires will burn again, the oil will flow, the dice will roll, the songs will rise. And someone else just like you will step through those arches and begin their own ordinary, extraordinary night in the great Roman baths. You don't go far. Something pulls you toward a smaller archway you hadn't noticed before, tucked near the outer edge of the baths. There's no crowd here, no music or chatter, just the faint sound of dripping water, rhythmic and patient. Like the bathhouse itself is counting the final moments of the night. You step through the narrow passage, finding yourself in a long, empty hallway lined with shallow, unused pools. The walls here are plainer, the mosaics simpler, no gods or battles, just patterns of waves and vines worn smooth by time. It feels like a part of the baths that people have slowly forgotten, like a room left untouched when all the attention moved elsewhere. A single attendant moves quietly through the space, gathering the last of the abandoned towels and stacking them in a large wicker basket. He doesn't notice you right away. When he does, he offers a tired nod, one that feels more like habit than greeting. You return the gesture, keeping your footsteps light as you wander toward one of the empty pools. You crouch down and run your fingers over the dry, cracked tiles. No water has touched them in weeks, maybe months. You wonder when this section was last filled, when bathers last leaned against these edges, whispering to friends or strangers. You sit on the cool stone floor for a moment, tracing the faded grout lines between the mosaic pieces. The silence here feels different, not empty but resting. Like the bathhouse itself is exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. You lean back on your hands, closing your eyes. You can almost hear it, the faint echoes of voices long gone. The splash of water long dried the laughter of bathers who never imagined their ordinary nights would one day turn into history. The attendant finishes gathering his things and slips quietly through another arch, leaving you alone with the soft, steady drip of water. You realize you could stay here for hours, letting the quiet wrap around you like a blanket. But something stirs in your chest, reminding you that the night is nearly over, that Rome waits outside. You rise slowly, giving the empty pool one last glance. You imagine it filled again, steam-rising voices carrying life humming through the air like it always has. Maybe tomorrow, maybe never. You step back into the corridor, following the soft glow of distant lamplight. The bathhouse is nearly empty now, the great bronze doors left slightly ajar, as if waiting for the final guest to slip through. You move toward them, passing the last few stragglers, an old man tightening his sandals, a woman adjusting her robe, a pair of friends sharing a quiet laugh. As you step into the main hall one final time, you glance toward the statue of Venus. Her stone arms stretched upward, face tilted toward the ceiling as if offering a silent prayer to the gods above. You stand for a moment mirroring her pose without meaning to arms, heavy at your sides, face lifted toward the vast starless ceiling. And in that moment you feel something you hadn't expected. Not pride, not nostalgia, not even rest. Gratitude. Gratitude for every crack in the stone, every crooked tile, every drop of water that's ever touched this place. You turn toward the doors, stepping into the cool night air as the city hums softly around you. Rome is still awake. The streets are quieter now, but they pulse with life in their own way. Footsteps on stone, distant laughter, the faint clatter of a cart on uneven ground. You pause on the threshold, one foot still inside, one foot outside, as if stretching time for just a heartbeat longer. And then you step fully out, letting the bathhouse settle behind you, like the closing of a great ancient book. The night air feels sharp on your skin, waking you from the warm, dreamlike spell of steam and stone. But the memory lingers, etched like graffiti on your mind, like the last ripple in a forgotten pool. And tomorrow the fires will burn again. You don't rush down the stone steps outside the bathhouse. You stand for a moment, adjusting your breathing, stretching your fingers as if shaking off the warmth still clinging faintly to your skin. The night in Rome is cool but not cold. You can feel the city breathing all around you somewhere. A street vendor calls out softly. A dog barks in the distance. The muffled sound of a flute drifts from a nearby alley. You look back once more at the towering, arched entrance of the baths. By daylight, it must seem magnificent, imposing even. But under the moonlight, the whole structure feels softer, quieter, as though it too is ready to sleep. You start to walk, your sandals slapping softly against the cobbled road. You pass a group of bathers gathered under a flickering street lamp, their laughter spilling into the street like wine from a tipped cup. One man, still wrapped in his towel, boasts loudly about how long he stayed in the caldarium without fainting. His friends roll their eyes, but none bother to challenge his exaggerated story. You smile to yourself. Some things never change. As you round the corner, you overhear two older women discussing the city's new aqueduct project. One grumbles that it's taking too long, while the other swears her cousin's neighbor's son is secretly profiting from the delays. You can't tell if it's true or just another layer of Roman gossip woven into the night air. Further ahead, you pass a small tavern, the door half open, the smell of roasted meat and garlic wafting into the street. You're tempted to stop to keep the night going just a little longer, but your body feels heavy now, tired in the best possible way. You keep walking the street, narrowing as you move deeper into the neighborhood. The sounds of the bathhouse already feel distant, like a dream you're waking from too soon. You pass a small fountain where a woman fills a clay jug, humming softly under her breath. She glances up as you approach, offering a polite nod before returning to her task. The sound of water trickling into the stone basin reminds you of the baths, the same rhythm, the same quiet pulse. You glance up at the night sky, trying to spot the stars through the faint mist hanging over the city. You think of the philosopher's words from earlier about steam oil and the soul. You wonder if he really believes all that, or if, like most Romans, he simply enjoys the sound of his own voice. You walk on passing doorways lit by oil lanterns, windows cracked open just wide enough to hear the quiet murmur of families settling in for the night. A group of children race past you, their bare feet slapping the stone, their laughter carrying through the alley as they disappear into the shadows. For a moment, you envy their energy, their carefree rhythm. You pause at a small intersection, unsure whether to turn left toward the Forum or right toward the Market District. Both feel like they could lead you somewhere familiar, somewhere safe. And yet, you hesitate, because something about tonight feels unfinished, as if the story you just lived through isn't meant to end here on these empty streets. You glance back one last time, even though you know the bathhouse is already out of sight. You let out a breath, slow and steady. You could keep walking. You could go home. You could let the night fade like every other. Or you could sit right here in the quiet heart of Rome and let the memories settle just a little longer. You choose the stone steps beside the fountain, lowering yourself slowly until you're sitting with your back against the cool wall. The water trickles beside you. The city hums softly around you, and for a moment it feels like you're still inside the bathhouse, wrapped in its steam-soaked embrace. Because maybe you never really left. Sitting here under the soft flicker of Rome's few scattered oil lamps, you realize something quietly powerful about the night you've just lived. It wasn't just a bath. It wasn't just the heat, the oil, or the scraping of a strigil against your skin. It was the way it slowed you down. You lean back, feeling the cool stone press into your spine, and let your mind wander through every detail you've gathered like puzzle pieces scattered across the mosaic floor. You think of the furnace workers sweating in the bowels of the Hippocaust, their faces blackened by soot. You remember the old woman tracing the dry fountain, her hand trembling, as if remembering younger, livelier days. You picture the boy in the service corridors running barefoot with towels bundled under his arm, unnoticed by the patrons above. They were all part of it, the rhythm, the living machine. And you had been carried along by it without even realizing. You hear footsteps in the distance, a soldier may be judging by the slow, heavy sound of his sandals. You don't turn to look. Instead, you close your eyes for a moment and let the breeze brush across your face. It smells faintly of burning wood, olive oil, and something you can only describe as Rome itself. You smile softly, shaking your head. What does that even mean? You're not sure, but the city breathes in a way that makes you feel like you're part of something bigger, something that existed long before you arrived, and will continue long after you've gone. You think of those bathers centuries ago carving their names into stone walls, probably never imagining anyone would read them 2,000 years later. And yet, here you are remembering them, smiling at their jokes, feeling the shape of their lives in your fingertips as you trace those crude little marks in the plaster. You wonder if anyone will remember you. You let the thought hang in the air, drifting with the night sounds of the city. Somewhere a cart rattles past the driver, humming softly to himself. A dog barks again in the distance. A woman laughs softly from a window above. The city doesn't sleep. Not really. It just changes shape, softening at the edges until night carries it gently toward morning. You realize you've been holding your breath again. You exhale slow and steady, letting the quiet fill your lungs. And for a moment you let yourself believe that this small moment sitting on a forgotten step beside a trickling fountain is enough. You don't need to understand all of it. You don't need to capture it or explain it. You just need to feel it. The heartbeat of Rome, the echo of steam, the warmth that still lingers on your skin. You press your palms against the stone one last time, grounding yourself in the present. And when you finally rise, you don't rush. You walk slowly, listening to the quiet, letting the night carry you forward step by careful step toward whatever waits next. The bathhouse may have closed its doors for the night, but in your mind the steam still rises, the water still hums, and the echoes of whispered stories continue to circle the stone walls waiting for someone else to hear them. Maybe tomorrow, maybe again someday, but for now, you walk on. You find yourself back on the worn stone road somewhere between the glowing heart of the city and the shadowy neighborhoods that stretch beyond the reach of torchlight. The bathhouse feels like a world away, though you know it's just a short walk behind you. You cross a narrow bridge spanning one of Rome's water channels, pausing to look down at the slow-moving stream. You imagine the Aqua Claudia, one of the great aqueducts, silently feeding the baths you've just left, channeling water from miles away through the empire's arteries. You lean on the railing, staring at the ripples on the surface below. You remember the water dripping from your skin in the frigidarium, the strange, breathless moment when you stepped from heat to cold. The way your heart had raced not from fear, but from the shock of being fully alive. You trace your fingertip over the edge of the stone rail, feeling the grooves carved by centuries of hands. Just like yours, all pausing here for reasons only they would ever know. In the distance, the soft glow of watchfires flickers on the city's outer walls. You wonder how many soldiers stand guard tonight, leaning on spears, staring into the darkness beyond Rome's safe edges. You turn away from the water, walking once more, this time toward a small garden square, where a few scattered lanterns sway gently in the breeze. You sit on the edge of a dry fountain, the stone still warm from the day's sun. Around you, Rome begins to breathe even slower. The market stalls are shuttered. The crowds have thinned. Only a few stragglers wander the streets, now workers heading home, lovers walking arm in arm, a lone street performer, packing away his lyre beneath a tattered cloak. You sit quietly, letting the emptiness settle. The bathhouse is finished for the night. The marble halls will soon fall silent. The fires will burn low beneath the stone floors. The attendants will gather the last of the towels, sweep the final traces of olive oil from the benches, and close the great bronze doors until tomorrow's sun rises once more. And yet, the story doesn't really end, does it? Because the bathhouse is never just a building. It's never just stone and steam. It's every whisper, every splash, every silent gaze exchanged in the mist. It's the laughter, the games, the foolish arguments, the quiet prayers. It's the living memory of everyone who has ever walked through those arches, and tonight that includes you. You close your eyes, breathing deeply. You let yourself remember the warmth on your skin, the flicker of lamplight on the water, the sound of soft footsteps on wet stone. You let those memories rise and fall like gentle waves. And as the city fades deeper into night, you feel your body begin to slow. Your breath softens. Your limbs grow heavy, and somewhere in the distance you imagine the bathhouse once more waiting in the steam, humming softly, ready to welcome you back whenever you need it. Not as a tourist, not as a historian, but as a fellow bather carried once more by the gentle tide of time. Sleep well, traveler.